The next item of business is portfolio questions. And first of all, we have questions on finance, economy and fair work. Question number 1, Gil Patterson.
Many thanks, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with the UK Government regarding the impact on Scotland on the cancellation of the 2019 UK budget.
Kate Forbes.
Well, the Scottish Government learned about the cancellation of the UK budget through the media. The calling of a general election means that a new UK budget date will not be known until December at the earliest. And without the UK tax announcements on the tax, social security and economic forecast produced for a UK budget, we will not have clarity on the funding available for public services in Scotland in 2020-21. That delay and the uncertainty unreasonably constrains our ability to plan future spending and the associated time for parliamentary scrutiny.
Gil Patterson.
Can I thank the Minister for that answer? Well, the UK Government departments have been given certainty on their budgets for next year as a result of the October spending round. The Scottish Government, along with its counterparts in Wales, still lacks the certainty it requires to set its own budget. What can the Minister do in this regard, since it's not just custom and practice being abandoned, but the Tories have seriously compromised the basis of funding Scotland's public services and setting out the Government's tax plans, and have damaged this Parliament's ability to scrutinise tax and spending plans ahead of this new tax year?
Kate Forbes.
The member is absolutely right. The UK Government has compromised the ability of the Scottish Government and indeed the Welsh Assembly and the Scottish Parliament to deliver certainty for public spending next year. The UK block grant adjustment accounts for over 40% of the Scottish fiscal resource budget, and we still do not know when the UK budget will be. That makes it very difficult to plan the timing of the Scottish budget, and a later budget means less time for the Scottish Parliament to scrutinise spending plans. I'm sure we would all agree that that is wholly unsatisfactory and is entirely due to the UK Government. We will continue to do everything that we can to progress the Scottish budget and protect the interests of Scotland.
I have 3 supplementaries, so not too long-winded, please. Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm sure, being a very fair-minded person, the Minister would be happy to acknowledge that all parties called for a December general election, with the consequence we now see for the budget process, because we do not know who will be in government after December the 12th, and therefore any spending commitments made up to this date may or may not be carried forward. Would she not acknowledge that the SNP MPs in Westminster must take their share of responsibility for the position we are now in?
Kate Forbes.
Well, and being a fair member in return, I'm sure that the member will understand that this is an issue that faces not just the Scottish Government, but also indeed all members in this chamber who believe in scrutiny. And with the UK position having changed significantly with the announcement of the general election, the Scottish Government has to consider its approach to the budget, and we will continue to engage Parliament and the Scottish Fiscal Commission in light of the various options that are available to us.
Patrick Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given that a much simpler budget at the start of devolution used to have something like a 4-month scrutiny period, we're now in an incredibly tight, constrained process, and we don't even know yet whether there'll be a UK budget before the next Brexit cliff edge date at the end of January. In that circumstance, does the Minister agree that it would be helpful for the Scottish representatives in this Parliament of the 2 parties likely to form the next UK government to write to their Treasury counterparts and insist that their parties commit now that the UK budget will be no later than the first week of January?
Kate Forbes.
The earlier that the budget is set at a UK level, the quicker we can get on in terms of setting our own budget. And it's in the interest, once again, not just of the government, but indeed of all members in this chamber to have maximum time for scrutiny. And to that end, as always, if members in the 2 main parties could put pressure on their own respective counterparts in Westminster to ensure that we have as much certainty as possible on when the budget is, then that would be in everybody's interest.
Rhoda Grant.
The Minister will be aware that the delayed Scottish budget will have a knock-on effect to other bodies such as local government and indeed the voluntary organisation. What contingencies sorry, what contingencies is she putting in place to make sure they can continue to deliver their services and that they will be adequately funded to do that?
Kate Forbes.
I do recognise the pressures that are on other bodies that depend on Scottish Government funding. And we have various different options available in terms of taking the budget through. We would like to do that as quickly and as early as possible. I think it's in the interest of the Parliament that we engage as much as possible, and we engage also with the Scottish Fiscal Commission to find the best approach to the circumstances that are forced on us by the UK Government.
Question number 2, Shona Robson.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on progress on the future of the Michelin site in Dundee in light of the first anniversary of the announcement to close it in 2020.
Jamie Hepburn.
Earlier today, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Economy and Fair Work attended the latest meeting of the Michelin Dundee Action Group, comprised of Michelin and the range of national and local public sector bodies and the trade unions. Michelin's commitment to the long-term future of the site is very evident, and we are clear that the Scottish Government's partners must at least match that. That's why we have announced a joint funding package of £60 million with Michelin to deliver our shared vision for the Michelin Scotland Innovation Park over the next 10 years. The park will attract companies, research institutions and a highly skilled workforce. We want Scotland to lead the way in developing and manufacturing the technologies of the future, and the park will be vital in helping us achieve this.
Shona Robson.
Can I thank the Minister for that reply and welcome the fantastic announcement of the £60 million investment by the partners Michelin, Scottish Government and Dundee City Council. Will the Minister join with me in welcoming the launch of the new branding for the Michelin Scotland Innovation Park, which I attended this morning? It's absolutely fantastic. Will he also pay tribute to the Michelin workforce, without whom none of this could have happened? They have played a key role in securing this investment in the site. And finally, can I ask the Minister how much the UK Government has offered to contribute towards this important project?
Jamie Hepburn.
Well, let me join with Shona Robson in welcoming the fact that the branding for the park is now available. I think we want the park to be very visible, and having some outward-facing branding is an important part of that. I too pay tribute to the workforce at Michelin. They have been outstanding throughout this process. As soon as the news of the future of the plant there was announced, their clear determination was to secure a future for the site, for the city of Dundee. Working with them, that's exactly what we've been able to do. In relation to a question about the funding, the UK Government has not contributed any funding towards the Michelin Scotland Innovation Park. Derek Mackay has written to Andrea Leadsom seeking a commitment to fund specific projects for the park, and we await a response with interest.
Supplementary, Bill Bowman.
Thank you. It's good to hear of these recent developments, but it's a pity that it took the loss of 800 jobs to get the Scottish Government to begin to think about these innovative opportunities. What action has been taken to shake up Scottish enterprise such that the Scottish Government does not sleepwalk into losing 800 crown jewel manufacturing jobs again?
Jamie Hepburn.
What an utterly miserly response to the news that we have, together with Michelin, Presiding Officer, ensured investment of £60 million into the city of Dundee to secure the future of the Michelin site. You would think Mr Bowman, as a member representing the North East of Scotland, would welcome that news. He has failed to do so, and I'm sure the people of Dundee will reflect on that.
Question number 3 was withdrawn. Question number 4 was not lodged. Question number 5, Anna Sarwar.
To ask the Scottish Government what plans it has to publish an assessment of the possible economic impact on Scotland of it leaving the UK.
Ivan McKee.
In this year's programme for Government, the Scottish Government committed to updating the plans it made for an independent Scotland in advance of the 2014 referendum. Currently, the greatest threat to the Scottish economy is presented by Brexit, and last week we published a further Scotland's Place in Europe paper assessing the revised withdrawal agreement and political declaration. The paper highlights the damage that will be done to Scotland should the UK leave the EU under the deal, and underscores the importance of allowing the people of Scotland the opportunity to choose their own future.
Anna Sarwar.
The Scottish Government was right to publish the economic impact assessment of Brexit. It will damage our economy, cost jobs and cause cuts to our public services. But you can't defeat chaos with more chaos. We share a border with England. We trade more with the rest of the UK than the rest of the world combined, and we have been intertwined for 300 years. We shouldn't let any nationalist ideology damage the interests of Scotland. That's why I support the UK staying in the European Union and Scotland staying in the UK. If he genuinely believes in standing up for Scotland's interests, why doesn't he?
Ivan Key.
Well, I'm going to start with that. The Scottish Government, as I said, has committed to update the economic impact in advance of any future referendum, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Very different from what was done in the case of Brexit, where all we had was a slogan painted on the side of a bus. And if the member cared to look at the work done by the Sustainable Growth Commission, or to look at, frankly, the situation that many of our small independent neighbours in Europe find themselves in, where because they have the ability to make their own economic decisions and decide their own future based on what's best for their economy, and they've gone from strength to strength, unlike Scotland that has suffered as part of the Union.
Supplementary, Dean Lockhart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government website, which publishes the GERS figures, which show that Scotland has a fiscal deficit of £12.6 billion, describes the GERS figures as being produced in line with the Code of Practice for Official Statistics, produced free of political interference, and providing a reasonable basis for assessing Scotland's standalone fiscal position. Does the Minister agree with this description of the GERS figures?
Ivan Key.
Yes, I do, and the GERS figures, as the member will understand, are a reflection on current Scotland's position as part of the Union. And they will understand also that given the opportunity to make our own economic decisions as an independent country, Scotland's economic position would be very, very different from that we currently suffer on as part of the Union. And the member will also be aware of the work of the Sustainable Growth Commission, which tracks Scotland's deficit reduction over time, has projected forward Scotland's deficit reduction to reduce to below the level required international norms. And we are currently progressing in advance of that reduction and doing better than the Sustainable Growth Commission projected when it was published 2 years ago.
Supplementary, Gil Patterson.
Thanks very much, Presiding Officer. Minister, I wonder if you could explain to me how it's possible for Scotland to have a deficit when we can't borrow any money, and if you, as a government, don't spend to the limit that you have, that we would lose the right to govern this country.
Ivan Key.
I thank the member for that question. The member will be aware that, as he correctly identifies, the Scottish Government's borrowing powers are severely restricted, and Scotland's Government manages within the budget allocated to and balances that budget on an ongoing basis, unlike the significant deficits run up by the UK Government. The GERS figures, as I indicated earlier, reflect the notional position that Scotland would be were all of those numbers allocated to Scotland's accounts. But as I said, it reflects the position that Scotland finds itself in as part of the Union, and not the situation that Scotland would find itself in as an independent country that was able, like other normal independent countries, to make economic and fiscal decisions to suit the economy and the population of Scotland.
Question number 6, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether COSLA has made any suggestions regarding additional financial powers that it seeks during the remainder of this parliamentary session.
Kate Forbes.
Well, we are committed to making local taxation more progressive whilst improving the financial accountability of local government. We're delivering our commitments on local tax reform, which will deliver the most significant financial empowerment of local authorities since devolution. COSLA have made no specific suggestions, including in their submission to our local governance review, for additional financial powers since we made those commitments in January of this year.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the Minister for that reply. COSLA have certainly made a number of suggestions to the Local Government Committee in terms of the need for additional powers, but does the Minister agree that it is incumbent on any organisation making representations to Ministers or committees for additional funding that they at least suggest where such funding should come from, whether through transfers from other areas of the Scottish budget, and if so, how much, or additional taxation, and if the latter, on whom that taxation should fall and to what extent?
Kate Forbes.
Well, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Economy and Fair Work has made clear to COSLA that we will consider specific proposals that COSLA may have, and we've made good progress in empowering local authorities financially in terms of discretionary local tax on tourism, as well as devolving non-domestic rates, empty property relief to local authorities. But at the end of the day, the member is quite right. It's the responsibility of all parties who request additional funding, including those in this room, to identify where they believe it should come from elsewhere in the budget, and if it includes additional tax-raising powers, who those should fall on and to what extent.
Supplementary, Sarah Boyack.
Given the existing pressures on local government, which I know the Minister is aware of, inflation, promises and wage settlements, can the Minister ensure proper funding for new government initiatives and for those areas where the Scottish Government has ring-fenced investment for local authorities, and will she commit to that funding?
Kate Forbes.
We will ensure, and as part of our budget process this year, we'll obviously be engaging with COSLA in terms of the financial settlement for this coming year. But separately to that, in terms of the fiscal framework and funding settlement, I'm leading work to develop a rules-based framework for local government funding, which would be introduced in the next Parliament, and that work is being taken forward in partnership with COSLA. Now, of course, on all matters of future funding, including for local government, and in particular the prospects of a 3-year funding settlement, the UK position has changed significantly following the announcement of the general election on the 12th of December. And that uncertainty over our budget date does flow into some of these commitments around long-term funding plans.
A short supplementary, please, from Patrick Harvey.
Does the Minister accept that all of those other small, independent Northern European countries that Scotland likes to compare itself to don't hoard power at the centre, but they give not only tax powers, but powers over land value capture, energy, public transport services, housing and much more to local level, and that the power of local government to transform their communities is awesome? Why shouldn't Scotland expect that strong creative tier of local government that we're so lacking at the moment?
Kate Forbes.
And that's why we jointly launched the Local Governance Review with COSLA, to ensure that Scotland's diverse communities and different places have greater control and influence over decisions that affect them most. And the reforms that we announced in January delivered the most significant financial empowerment of local authorities since devolution. We know that there's further to go, and that's why I mentioned in my answer to the member previously on the rules-based framework. So there's work there being taken forward. We recognise that more control should be at a local level, and we'll continue to work with other members in the Parliament to do that.
Question number 7, Annie Wells.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how much Scottish Government and Scottish enterprise funding has been provided to companies as part of the £500 million Scottish Growth Scheme.
Ivan McKee.
The Scottish Government is committed to unlocking private sector investment for businesses through a variety of mechanisms. The Scottish Growth Scheme uses public sector investment to lever the private sector and aims to unlock up to £500 million of investment for Scottish SMEs. To September 30, 2019, some £160 million had been invested under the Scottish Growth Scheme, which has supported 262 businesses. This has been enabled through investments totalling £24.1 million from Scottish Enterprise and £3.5 million from the Scottish Government. Current uncertainty in the economy has likely had an impact on demand for funding, with recent research indicating that firms are putting off investment as they await the outcome of Brexit.
Annie Wells.
Presiding Officer, Nicola Sturgeon stood in this very chamber and said that she would deliver a £500 million vote of confidence in Scottish businesses. And as we've just heard, the truth is very different. Why should anyone believe a word this SNP government says when they say £500 million and don't mean anything close to that?
Ivan McKee.
I think Annie Wells, which is surprising for a Conservative member, fails to understand what this is all about. It's about the Scottish Government using its economic power to unlock private sector investment through looking for barriers that exist in the system, supporting to remove those blockages to unlock that private sector investment into Scottish SMEs. It's about lubricating the wheels to make the private sector do what it should and can do to support Scottish businesses. The £500 million is not £500 million of government money getting put into businesses. It's £500 million of including unlocking all the private sector investment to enable that investment to go into SMEs to support them to grow and develop within the current situation situation. And as I say, the current uncertainty in the economy is what is causing the lack of demand for businesses. But that investment is there. Businesses that want to come forward and take advantage of it are very welcome. If the member is aware of any businesses that want to take advantage of that funding, please encourage them to come forward, because the blockage on this isn't the lack of government support to lubricate the private sector and unlock private sector investment. It's the lack of businesses coming forward to take advantage of the offer that is there on the table from the Scottish Government.
Question number 8 was not lodged, so that includes portfolio questions on finance, economy and fair work. We now move on to portfolio questions on environment, climate change and land reform. We move to question number 1, which is Finlay Carson.
To ask the Scottish Government how it tackles non-native invasive species.
Marie Goujon.
The Scottish Government is working with a range of partners to minimise the negative impacts caused by invasive non-native species in Scotland. The focus is on preventing their release and spread and on responding quickly when needed. There are 3 parts to our strategy. Firstly, to prevent the release and spread of non-native species, focusing on areas where they can cause damage to native species and habitats and to economic interests. Secondly, rapid response to new populations of non-native species. And thirdly, to apply effective control and eradication measures where needed.
Finlay Carson.
Thank the Minister for that response. Yesterday at the Clare Committee, the Committee on Climate Change highlighted the multiple high concerns with regards to progress on the Scottish Government Climate Change Adaptation Programme. Water quality in almost half Scottish rivers is poor and not improving, and pressures on freshwater habitats from non-invasive non-native species are increasing, which suggests that the current targets and actions may not be sufficient to address the rising risk. Even with excellent work being done by organisations such as the Galloway Fisheries Trust and the Cree Hatchery and Habitat Trust, more needs to be done to ensure a fit-for-purpose...
Get to your question, please, Mr Carson.
More needs to be done to find a model to attack this on a catchment basis. What is the Government doing to address the shortcomings in the current funding schemes?
Marie Goujon.
I thank the member for that question, because we absolutely recognise how important it is to tackle invasive non-native species because of the threats that they pose to our biodiversity. And they're estimated to cost us in Scotland in the region of £250 million a year. So it is a massive challenge. And that's where I would agree that we have to always strive to do more to try and tackle these species, to tackle invasive non-native species. Now, one such project that we've had underway, which has been in the north of Scotland, is the Scottish Invasive Species Initiative. Now, that's been a 4-year project on river catchments, and I went to visit that in the South Esk River in my own constituency this year and met with the project manager and the project officer. And just to give you an idea of some of the figures involved in that, 342 volunteers took part as part of that last year, 736 kilometres of giant hogweed was treated, and 195 volunteers helped monitor mink rafts. Because I think that's part of the secret to helping to tackle this, is by working with communities, working with volunteers and trying to encourage as much of that work as possible. And we're also working with SNH to try and look at a more strategic approach to how we tackle, for example, invasive species of plants. But I'd be happy to get back to the member with more detail on that.
Supplementary, Joan McAlpine.
Thank you. Can the Minister tell us whether exiting the EU will damage our ability to prevent invasive alien species arriving in Scotland?
Marie Goujon.
Now, by their very nature, invasive non-native species do not respect national boundaries, and that's why we will aim, and we do aim, to work collaboratively with EU countries where we can after Brexit. But leaving the EU will limit our ability to get species onto the EU-wide lists that guarantee that cooperation and collaboration with other European countries, and reduce our capacity to prevent the spread and establishment of species that can damage our biodiversity and as well as our economy.
Question number 2, Alison Johnson.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government how many carbon credits will be generated for Shell as part of its partnership with Forestry and Land Scotland.
Marie Goujon.
The 5-year work programme developed by Forestry and Land Scotland will enable Shell to claim up to 250,000 carbon units over the next 100 years through the creation of new woodlands and the restoration of degraded peatlands on Scotland's national forests and land. All carbon units will be validated and verified under the Woodland Carbon Code and the Peatland Code as appropriate.
Alison Johnson.
Thank you. There's very little from the Scottish Government about this partnership in the public domain, and Perhaps the Scottish Government is understandably uncomfortable about taking money from one of the world's largest polluters. Absolutely. But Shell themselves are boasting that the deal is worth £5 million and suggest that it will allow drivers to offset their fuel purchases. Can the Minister confirm whether the sale of carbon credits from the public estate to fossil fuel corporations is now government policy and whether any further deals are currently being discussed?
Marie Goujon.
I think in response to the member, I mean, I do think that we just come at this from a fundamentally different perspective, because I would say that the project that's happening at the moment, it does not change any of our ambitions or the work that we hope to do. Because again, we have the most ambitious climate change targets of anywhere in the world. And we have to recognise that we cannot cease production of oil overnight and just import problems from elsewhere. And we have a Just Transition Commission to help us to achieve that transition to becoming a low-carbon economy. And in the meantime, that's where these kind of partnerships and initiatives are vital and will continue to be vital in that work. Again, it doesn't change the work that we have to do. It doesn't alter any of our targets. What it does do is help us sequester more carbon from the atmosphere in the meantime.
Question number 3, Gillian Martin.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on flood resilience plans ahead of winter.
Rosanna Cunningham.
It is important to remember that flooding can happen at any time, so we work closely with our partners to promote flood preparedness and build community resilience throughout the year. We've also increased our funding to the Scottish Flood Forum this year to £190,000, and the Flood Forum provide vital support for both before, during and after flooding to communities across Scotland. I encourage those at risk of flooding to keep informed by signing up to receive flood alerts and warnings through the Scottish Environment Protection Agency's Floodline Service.
Gillian Martin.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Yesterday, in the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee, we heard from the Committee on Climate Change that flood mitigation plans and infrastructure development need to plan for an increase in global temperatures of a 3 to 4 degree scenario. Is the Climate Change Adaptation Plan that the Government has produced working on that assumption? And is this kind of planning for the effects of climate change that really Scotland doesn't contribute to, could happen with the rest of the world? Does that happen across all portfolios?
Rosanna Cunningham.
Well, there's a 5-year programme to help Scotland prepare for the impacts of climate change. It was laid in Parliament on the 23rd of September. The programme does address the priority risks for Scotland and follows advice provided by the Committee on Climate Change, and that will also work across a range of policy areas, including undertaking research to conduct the economic assessment of flood risk, recovery from extreme weather events, climate impacts on social care, and obviously there are a huge range of planning and housing issues that are affected by this. So yes, the work on this does range over a significant number of portfolios.
If we keep supplementaries short, we'll get through all the questions. Claudia Beamish, followed by Finlay Carson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask Scottish Government if it is in dialogue with local authorities, Scottish Water and communities to take forward action to support SUDs or sustainable drainage systems and an assessment of the development of urban creep to help with future flood incidents and to minimise these and develop community resilience.
Rosanna Cunningham.
That dialogue is almost constant. My officials, SEPA, local authorities are in a constant conversation about these issues, because we are very conscious indeed that more than one thing impacts flooding. And while flooding is a understood consequence of climate change, nevertheless, there are human activities that are not related to climate change that nevertheless can exacerbate it and need to be addressed as well.
Finlay Carson.
In the winter of 2015, after severe flooding, the First Minister committed to help my hometown of Newton Stewart. It's now only through incredible resilience and determination of the community that the main street is returning to normal. But despite that promise from 4 years ago, no flood prevention measures have been taken. Please? Given that, can the Cabinet Secretary give my constituents in Newton Stewart a commitment that the Scottish Government will deliver on the First Minister's commitment to the people of Newton Stewart?
Rosanna Cunningham.
Well, the Scottish Government, this particular Scottish Government, has spent more and done more in regards of flood protection than any previous government has done. And that has been brought about by an overall strategic approach to it, which is agreed with local authorities. So, and that is something that is ongoing. I would invite the member to indicate, perhaps directly to me, if not to his own local authority, what the local authority's representations have been, and I would be happy to engage with them on that.
Question number 4, Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to address issues regarding pollution management at the Turbolton landfill site.
Rosanna Cunningham.
Legal duties regarding the management and condition of the site are the responsibility of the owner or operator. In this case, the legal obligations under the permit are ongoing and rest with the official receiver, the liquidator of the company. Whilst the official receiver currently remains responsible for site management, SEPA officers continue to undertake an intensive programme of monitoring. Nevertheless, SEPA has arranged for scoping work to be done to establish the likely costs and practicalities of options for management and mitigation works at the site.
Brian Whittle.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. She will be aware that I've raised this several times in this chamber, because every surgery that I hold this issue is raised, and recently this 4-year-old twins of a constituent of mine are now not permitted to play outside. Indeed, they're reporting that they can now smell pollutants on their clothes. I have sent video evidence indicating what a terrible situation is and how it gets worse. Is it not time, Cabinet Secretary, that the Scottish Government stepped in here to make this site safe for the health of the surrounding area, then seek to establish responsibility and recompense?
Rosanna Cunningham.
Well, I appreciate entirely how horrific this situation is for those who are most directly affected by it, and I have discussed this with the member. I have actually outlined where the legal responsibilities currently lie, and it is not just as simple as stepping in and taking over. Notwithstanding, we are a government, we have to act legally. I am very conscious that there has been some more recent work done by SEPA. Now, you know, SEPA are there, they are on the ground, they are the government's agency who is monitoring and working with that. I know that they've got a concern about additional remedial work that requires to be done before they can continue, and I can confirm that that is going to be funded in the immediate future. So I'm hoping very much that there will be some progress in that respect, but that doesn't remove from the equation the fact that it is in private ownership and is currently in the hands of the liquidators. So there is a very tricky situation that surrounds this. And I know the member understands that. I also know the member is quite rightly concerned about the impact on local people, as are we all.
Question number 5, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what progress it has made on improving farm-level emissions and carbon sequestration data.
Marie Goujon.
We know that our farmers and crofters provide wider benefits through actions like tree planting, renewable energy generation and the protection of historic carbon stores. The Scottish Government remains committed to working with our farmers and crofters and others with a means to demonstrate this and to explore whole farm carbon footprinting and agricultural produce emissions intensity. However, it has to be understood that any of these other complementary actions cannot replace the greenhouse gas inventory, which is determined by international classifications.
Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Minister for that response. This kind of data is certainly complex and crucial if we are to have an accurate assessment of carbon management by indoor farms and estates. Can I ask the Minister, given that talks are already taking place and already underway, if the Scottish Government will next year publish a report on its works with clear dates and timescales of its progress?
Marie Goujon.
I'd be happy to look at that because, again, there is so much work underway at the moment because we absolutely recognise the scale of the challenge that is involved here. And I think that, I know that certainly from some of the farmers that I've spoken to, it can be seen as a great cause of frustration. The fact that it can be seen as, you know, if they cause emissions rather than all the positive work that people are able to do on their land. And I think that's why it's absolutely vitally important that we find a way of properly taking account of all that. So, as I say, the work on that will be ongoing. This is something I'm happy to talk to the member about in further detail as well with regards to some of the other initiatives that we're looking at and how we intend to progress this work.
Short supplementaries, please. Angus MacDonald.
Can the Minister advise the Chamber how many carbon audits were provided for in the Farm Advisory Service and how many have been taken up?
Mary Goodrum.
I would be happy to respond to the member with that. The Farm Advisory Service has received 629 applications for carbon audits, and that's more than twice our annual target. And I think that those kind of figures show the willingness of our farmers, crofters and land managers to be part of the solution to tackling climate change and to cut emissions. And I would really encourage all farmers and crofters to look at the opportunities, information and advice available through the Farm Advisory Service. Now, carbon audits are just one aspect of this. It can also provide integrated land management plans, specialist advice, mentoring and a raft of technical notes and case studies which are aimed at helping our agricultural industry work towards a more sustainable future.
Question number 6 was not lodged. Question number 7, Jamie Halcrow-Johnson.
Can I draw the Chamber to my register of interest as a partner in a farming business to ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the management of geese and stoat populations in Orkney?
Rosanna Cunningham.
Scottish Natural Heritage met with the Orkney Goose Management Group in June 2019 to discuss agricultural damage caused by resident grey-lag geese. A range of actions were agreed to help the group develop a management strategy. With regard to stoats, work has now commenced to seek to eradicate stoats on Orkney as part of the Orkney Native Wildlife Project. Stoats are a non-native species on Orkney, and any sightings can be reported on the websites for the Orkney Native Wildlife Project and Scottish Natural Heritage.
Jamie Halcrow-Johnson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I know that she and Scottish Natural Heritage are aware of the impact of goose numbers in Orkney, the frustration of local farmers that the issue has not been addressed yet and the need to get a long-term sustainable solution in place. However, the Cabinet Secretary will also be aware that some of the package of measures being considered will require funding to implement. And so can I ask her whether she is looking to have that funding included in the Scottish Government budgets to support those measures at combating geese numbers in Orkney?
Rosanna Cunningham.
Well, I'm always looking for more money for my portfolio, so I hope the member will take that as read. The arrangement between SNH and the local goose management group does, however, talk about a range of actions, and I don't want to list them because I suspect the member already knows what the range of actions actually are. And I do understand the real problem that is developing now. Grey-lag geese have been historically a migratory species, but there's now a population of grey-lag geese who are staying put. They've stopped travelling and they've decided to take up residence, and that is one of the things that create the problem. But I can reassure the member that we are keeping an eye on this and thinking very carefully about what can be done.
Short supplementary, please, Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her comments in the summer. I took up the offer from Douglas Patterson to see the damage firsthand that it caused to crops and to farmland in the East Mainland. I acknowledge the work done by SNH and others involved in the local group, but could I extend the invitation on behalf of Douglas Patterson and the local NFU for the Cabinet Secretary to visit Orkney early part of next year to see firsthand just quite what damage is being done to farmland in Orkney?
Rosanna Cunningham.
Sorry, my schedule didn't allow for this during my August visit. I'm always happy to visit Orkney. I'm always happy to have a reason to visit Orkney, and I'm very happy to talk to the member about the best time for that.
Question number 8, Bob Doris.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it supports community recycling initiatives in Glasgow.
Rosanna Cunningham.
The Scottish Government supports community recycling through different funding streams, such as Zero Waste Scotland's Resource Efficient Circular Economy Accelerator Programme and the Climate Challenge Fund. These funds can support projects involving waste and circular economy activities, including recycling. Community groups can also get tailored support and advice for recycling initiatives from Zero Waste Scotland.
Bob Doris.
Thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The Cabinet Secretary can draw our attention to ambitious plans from the newly formed Springburn Youth Forum in my constituency to reclaim a patch of neglected land outside Springburn Academy and create a seating area for students at lunchtime and co-locate community recycling facilities which could double act as a community hub to encourage recycling across the wider area. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to offer her support for such innovative plans, and does she think that such initiatives should be encouraged more widely, not just in my constituency but right across Scotland?
Rosanna Cunningham.
I certainly do. It sounds like an extremely interesting project, and may I offer the member that if he wishes to invite me to come and visit, then I would be happy to do so.
That concludes portfolio questions on environment, climate change and land reform, and we'll move on to the next item of business.